So if your sun starts at 15 degrees, say your sun starts at 15 degrees of Aries, every Aries is going to have the phase of Taurus and Gemini, 60 years. But if it starts at 1 degree, that Taurus phase will start at 29. But if it starts at 15 degrees, that Taurus phase will start at 15 and go to 45 instead of from 29 to 59. These are huge different phases. If you're at the end, you have your natal sun is at, say, 27 degrees of Aries. At 3 years old, it goes into Taurus. So from 3 to 33, you have the Taurus progressed sun. And then from 33 to 63, you have the Gemini, playful, curious Gemini side. Then at 63, it goes into the moody Cancer side. So you always almost end up in the sign that's squaring your sun in the order of the zodiac. If you live long enough, if you get through that 90 years, you're going through that other phase, and you're seeing your life differently. But there's a growth pattern. So you get these 30-year phases. They'll start some point in the first 30 years of your life. Your progressed sun will change sign. That's the first big phenomenal change of attitude in your life. We're going to go through this. We're going to go through all of them. I'm just trying to explain this a little bit right now so you get a sense of what we're getting into, because we're going to have to do some calculations to figure out these things. But you start thinking any sign, and you go, are they as a Capricorn going to be in their Capricorn or in their Aquarius, in their Capricorn phase, in their Aquarius phase, or in their Pisces phase, or in their Aries phase? When they're older, many old Capricorns start acting like they're 15, try to act like when they're 15 when they hit 80 or something, when they get up into that Aries phase. Libras, like me, we go along with the Libra, it gets into Scorpio. You have 30 years of the passionate Scorpio, then 30 years trying to understand what you did or where it's going to. And then when you get old, you get the old grumpy Capricorn. The Libras end up with the Capricorn. What have I done? What have I worked? How much time have I gotten? It gets more serious. You have the Saturn rulership through that time period. So these are just built in. We're going to go through all of this, but I just wanted to give you a sample so you can be thinking for yourself what degrees your sun and where's it going. And well, we'll kind of do that. But now, okay, so look at young. So at 27, his progressed sun went to Virgo. Then his real analytical analysis and psychoanalysis and development thinking really started to develop. And he started to think things through. But that's 30-year phases. So he has that for 30 years. You say, oh, it's there for 30 years, and you don't have to think about it for 30 years. Or it floats there for 30 years. Too big a thing to measure what it means. Too big a place of time. But what happens, you have a 30-year thing. So if you take the pentans, you got 5-year divisions. You got 5-year plans inside the 30 years. If you go down to the subpentans, you got 1-year plans inside of it. So suddenly, this is like a calendar of how much you tap, and all these deeper things will happen. Your progressed sun will go across. It's going to go. If you live 90, it's going to cross. It's going to either conjunct or it'll probably go across one angle in your life. In this case, Carl Jung's his sun will never go across an angle in his lifetime, but it will square. It might, if he lives long enough, it'll square his ascendant. But it doesn't. His really is an exception, because usually the sun will cross an angle at some point in your life, which is a really big shift in the consciousness again. So all of these things are shifts in they're shifts in inner attitude. Now we work a lot with seeing the planets and the signs and the attitudes they affect the signs, and how the attitudes go on to the planets. And here we're seeing how the attitudes shift and evolve. While they're there, they still have an inner shifting and evolving, a mechanic working on through our lifetime. And this is what we're evolving. So we just looked at the sun, but each planet's going to do that. As the sun goes around, so each sun sign, for the 30 days after, for 90 days after you're born, is going to be your progressed sun. You're going to experience that inwardly. But then, not only that, you're going to have the new moons and full moons after you're born. Every new moon and full moon is going to be a huge inner sensitivity of your past and your future coming together, and you're inwardly aspiring to it. So there's phenomenal influence of the new moons and full moons and the moon phases, which we studied at the beginning. And in the interpretation, the moon phases become 7-year plans. The moon phases are going on. So there are all these layers of timing going on with the progressions. And the moon phases become really vitally alive. You see, what phase am I going through now? Oh, is that so? And then you read the moon phase. Oh, wow, look at that. You see it. Then you still say, well, what more can I do with it? Because the things with progressions, when you notice something, it's going to be there. When you notice something, it's there for a while, or it's been there for a while. We're slowing down 90 days to make 90 days equal to a life, equal to 90 years. A 1-day aspect is going to have a 1-year effect. But really, the moon moves about a degree a month. It would take a little bit. So really, you're talking the 2 hours of a new moon, or 2 hours of a moon aspect, 2 hours going in, 2 hours coming out. Like the 2 hours would be a month. Yeah, sorry, how about I just, yeah, the hours would be a month or two. So the fastest aspect in progressions is a 2-month aspect. The sun giving 1 degree aspects, it comes in and out. It's going to be 2-year aspect, 2.5 years in orb for any aspect. It's not just on it. It's happening in a day. In transits, the sun just is 2 days, the day before, day after. You might widen it a little bit, but it's really a couple of days. But that's a couple of years in your progress chart in your life where you're trying to figure things out. So you can see it. It's hard to say, well, this is what this 2 years means, because there's other things going on. It's an evolution, and we're lucky to tune into it. When we tune into it, we're tapping energy, we're tapping ideas, we're tapping things that can help us be more alive, or more sensitive, more aware, and accomplish more. But most people, I mean, before we're 45 or so, you probably can hardly even see progressions. You can think about what they are, but you don't really understand it. Like, you almost have to be closer to death than birth to be able to look back and see this wave of, oh, look how this happened. Oh, this is where, oh, and you begin to see the implications more and more as you get older in your life. You see where you've come, you see how it's evolved. Then a real poetry, a real music, and a dance comes in astrology through these progressions. Some people just living in a material world, they're not conscious of these things at all. And even if you're trying to be, if you're studying them as astrology, you can look at, but if you're trying to interpret progressions the same as transits, that's what they do with solar arcs, so we don't use it, but it superficializes the depth of what you can get from this. So it's just taking your transiting knowledge and applying it to the progressions, and it's really an insult to the higher sensitivities. It's really profaning it or mundaning it instead of leaving it to wonder and leaving to see how do you measure our soul? How do we measure how our soul's growing? What's learning from experience? Well, we talked about progression, we talked about precession, and in the precession of the equinoxes, it precedes 72 years for each degree, and 360 degrees times 72 years is your 25,600 year cycle, great cycle. And some people believe we're born for each one. 72 years was always 310 was the length of a person's life, or a good life. And that was, people would live, we'd go through all the experiences across a whole great age, through each degree, each study till we've experienced it all. And then we move on to whatever. One of the theories. So with progressions, we're looking at 90 years, we're watching things, but things are changing, they're evolving, we're experiencing things, and there's going to be repercussions. So if we experience things badly, there'll be places where that bad karma has to catch up, and we're having, whether there's good or bad karma out in the world, we're still learning from the experience. I've learned way more from my enemies than I ever did from my friends. But then I never got any hugs from my enemies. Maybe I did at the beginning, and they turned, but anyway, things change. So we're adding another layer. But it's a layer of timing. So we have the natal chart with all its layers, planets and signs, planets and houses, aspects, all the different layers going on there. And we put that into like a boat or into a sphere of the natal interpretation. Then we added a layer of transits going around it. Well, really, it's like a layer for each planet. There's a different layer of timings going around. So you have all these cycles of the planets going around. And there are all these different layers happening in time. Now we're jumping up, we're adding a whole nother frequency where there's layers of planets and progressed planets, which are another whole fabric of timing and another way of watching things. But because they happen so slowly, so when we're doing transits, boy, really, it's easy to see Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars. You can see them, they're very obvious. But Mars, Moon, Mercury, and Venus are so superficial, we hardly see them. Like they go, but they happen for a couple of hours, they go by. You can read them into a chart if you use a chart for a moment, but in the transits, seeing their cycles, it's very trivial compared to the bigger things going on. However, in the progressions, these planets move fairly slowly and they develop. You really begin to understand the development of your Mercury, of your mind, and development of your emotions, and of your past and your family as the Moon and the Mercury and the Venus move around in your chart. There's different layers, the different layers of the planets. They're all different levels, but they're a higher inner level of what's going on. My inner attitudes. That's why I like to look. The inner attitudes and how they shift while I'm dealing with things out in the world. Okay, so this, everyone, we're just gonna go look through, we'll look through everyone's charts now, but I just want to point out, like, the new moons, full moons after life, but then you might have planets conjuncting. Like if we look at his sun, like 3 degrees, his Uranus is at 14 degrees, so at 11, age 11, his sun conjuncted Uranus. Just at 11 days old, his sun went up and conjuncted Uranus. In his 11th year, he was having fainting spells and was faking fainting spells and faking neurosis to get out of school and other things. And he learned about neurosis by playing that game as this progressed sun went over the Uranus. So like, I'm just giving links. We're going to come back. We got to sort it through because it's too easy. It gets to be too much. And you look at it, wow, you have to slow each thing down and give it time and hear its story. But that sun was a 2-year, the sun 2 days, 1 day before it hit Uranus, 1 day after. So that's a 2-year period. That was exactly that period when he was going through that trauma time when he was a kid in school. I don't want to get so specifically into his chart, but just for everyone, we're going to have, not only is the planet going through signs, we'll change the house cusps, but it really, we'll see it when it goes across the angles. That's the one we'll watch the most. And then it will make aspects to your chart. And each one of those aspects will be stages of your development. And each aspect, if it's a sun, it's going to last a couple of years. You know, if it's Mercury, Venus, it's still going to last. It could be 1 to 2 years. Sometimes if they're slowing down, going retrograde or going direct and they slow down, they could be in the same aspect or in that same degree for 5 or 10 years or 5 or 10 days. And that's 5 or 10 years of your life. This is where it seems fated, but it begins to explain these, like the transits are like the waves on the ocean, but the progressions are like swells and they're like the whole body and the whole being of the ocean that's moving and changing. The waves are just on the top, on the surface. So when you're going to get Mercury and Venus or the moon, they're going to come up and they're going to make their aspects to Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They're going to be big trucks coming from Venus. It's not, Uranus and Pluto don't move too much in 90 days, but Mercury, Venus, and the moon will move around and they'll hit those things. And those will be big inner transformations. We'll begin to see the effects of how our mind and our emotions and our values change inwardly. It's a different frequency than what's happening outwardly. So they can be changing inwardly at the most convenient time or at the most inconvenient times out in the world, but it's still going to be happening. And then you have to try and integrate the two levels or try and close one off or work with whatever one you think is most important or whatever.